Enjoy with your headphones for a better listening experience.
Please watch till the end of the video to have the most scariest part of the story.
What's your, no one will ever believe this, true story? Part 2. A long time ago I used to chat with people on Omegle, before it became the cesspool of cyber that it is now. My favorite thing to do was to tell people that I was psychic, and then when they'd ask me to prove it I'd tell them to think of a number between 1 and 100. I'd tell them their number was 34. Most of the time I was wrong and they'd just say, nice try, and I'd say, worth a shot, and we'd continue with the conversation. But, sometimes I'd get it right and they would have their minds absolutely blown. Then I would make a random cryptic prediction about their life and disconnect. Just doing my part to make this a more surreal world. I was playing with my friend's drone in a small field. The drone had lost connection from the controller and fell down, so I ran to pick it up. I picked it up, and fog started rolling in. I didn't think anything of it and started walking towards my friend. What set me off that something was wrong was that I didn't run into anything after walking for about a minute. Like I said, it was a small field. On top of that, I would have hit a picnic table, play structure, or gone down a hill after walking for that long in any direction, but there was just nothing. I couldn't tell which way the sun was because of the fog, and it was just me, fog, and a bit of grass at my feet. It was also remarkably quiet. I started running, and after about 2 minutes I still didn't see anything new. Suddenly, out of nowhere, I see my friend, and he asks if I'm okay. The fog dissipates, and he said that I was standing in place for the past minute. I was young, maybe around 8 or so. My older brother and I were sitting in my room when suddenly blinds, closed at the time, started shaking like in a ripple motion from top to bottom. We froze and I noticed a shadow of a hand in the top left corner. That just happened to be where a big hole was in my window. We started to laugh cause we thought it was our dad playing a trick on us, so we called out to him real loud and heard him answer from the other side of the house. We then called out to my mom thinking it was her, but she also answered from the other side of the house with my dad. We started yelling and my parents came running. After we explained to them, they opened the blinds and there was a squirrel on the screen outside my window. Not uncommon, I'm from a slightly more rural area in Alabama. They said that's all it was. Once my parents left, my brother looked at me asking me if I saw the shadow of the hand as well. I said yeah and described it to him in detail. I saw it extending from the top left and it looked like it had semi-long sharp fingernails. We couldn't figure out how a squirrel on the outside of the house could rattle the blinds inside my room. I think my parents only told us that to calm us down. I was, maybe, almost kidnapped as a baby. I was only like 1.5 when this happened, so I obviously don't remember it, and the most reliable source, my mom, refuses to talk about this, so I had to hear this from my dad. One night about a month after my brother was born, my mom woke up to crying and went to go check on my brother since he was just born. He was still asleep, so she went to go check on me. I wasn't in my crib. My mom panicked and ran downstairs. I was apparently sitting up on the couch crying. I don't think I could have gotten there myself because the crib bars were still up, and my dad says he'd never seen me pull myself up onto the couch before. That plus neither of my parents have a history of sleepwalking have led me to believe I was almost kidnapped. Either way, it was a dangerous situation for me. If I did get there myself, what if I fell along the way and hurt myself? If someone tried to snatch me, what would they do with me? I almost don't believe this story myself, but the look of terror the few times it's been brought up in front of my mom leads me to believe the story is true. I went to drink water at the kitchen well past midnight and I had to walk past a small indoor garden. I look up because I felt watched. There was something watching me from the balcony of the top room, which was abandoned as storage build. I aim my shitty phone camera to see it better because until then I thought it was just my dog that scraped from the nearby terrace. Nope, something with a dog-like white and furless face was watching from inside that room. Shit was at least 2 m tall and had black fur everywhere but its face. I rapidly took a picture and went back to my room. Guess that explains those times I've heard something heavy moving around at blackouts. Due to the quality of the camera and how scared I was, you can't see anything but its nose and a bit of its mouth, but I clearly saw at least its shoulders and empty eyes. Later on while I was moving out I got to enter there to retrieve something. The rotten wooden floor almost couldn't support me. I was at work one night. I work in fast food, and I was the only person on expo for that shift. When you're on expo, you stand outside and deliver people's food in the drive-thru. And there are these little receipts on the bags that say the customer's name, what they ordered, and what they're driving. So it's going normal until I get to a guy named Adam in a silver sedan. This man ordered 2 of every sauce, and a cherry Coke mixed with Sprite, the order of an absolute menace. So I give him his food and he pulls forward, and I go to deliver the next order. As I'm about to get to the next car, all I hear is 18 naked cowboys in the showers at Ram Ranch, coming through the loudest car speakers I've heard in my life. I turn around, and of course, it's that bloody silver sedan and the tires spin as he speeds off. Nobody believes me when I tell this story. I don't know where that guy is today, but Adam, thank you for making my shift more interesting. I was about 20 years old and driving home from work. At a red light this guy moved his car in front of me and stopped, in the middle of traffic. As I was trying to move to the other lane he cut me off and stopped again. I moved again to the other lane and he did it again. I put my car in parking, yes it was very stupid if me lol, and went up to his window and he said, "If you don't go back to your car I'm going to kill you." I went back to my car and he drove off. I had my cell phone in my car. I don't know why I didn't call the police. Nobody in my family believed me and said that probably he did it because I was driving like a maniac. I wasn't. I was just in a red light. My girlfriend and her sister and I were all celebrating her birthday in the mountains. I was the DD and stayed sober the whole time, anyways. We were having a good time, when all of this sudden we heard a whistling in the forest. We heard it 3 times. But it was a different kind of whistle, it didn't sound human. The vibe was immediately ruined and we packed all of our things and started heading back to the car. As we walked back, we saw the silhouette of a man on a hill maybe 100 feet away from us. We saw him shift from a man back into a dog, and back into a man. All 3 of us were spooked and bolted it back to the car. I swear I don't know what I saw, but I know whatever it wasn't human. The creepiest part about it is that we all saw the same thing. When I was 8 I went camping with my sister who was 19 at the time and she brought her boyfriend. We were making smokes when something moved in the bushes. Was it a bear? I had no clue, but then it moved again and my sister boyfriend went to check it out. He then tried scaring us, but the bear crept right behind him and attacked her boyfriend. I was horrified at the sight of her boyfriend's face being ripped off and his lumps being torn apart. The bear ripped his head off and I was absolutely petrified. Me and her left immediately and called 911. They didn't bother doing much, they just made the call he was dead, and me and her went to therapy for a few years. I'm now 23 and I'm still horrified at the sight of the woods. A few months ago I was on a scout camp. It went like any other scout camp goes. All the P.LS, patrol leaders, had to have a meeting about the camp and the plans later on the camp. That afternoon this one kid starts acting creepy and says he has sleep paralysis. No one believed him. He continued saying he could see demons walking around him. I and 3 others didn't believe him. So we asked him where he got corrupted. He told us over the fence and through the trail. I and the 3 others walked to the location he told us about and jumped the fence. As he explained, there was a trail. We followed the trail through bushland until the trail ran out after about 5 minutes. One of the guys I was with said, "See, told you there's nothing here." We agreed with him and started walking back up. 5 seconds later, in the distance we heard a crack from a tree, like a branch snapped off. We shot our heads around afraid of what there might be. There, falling from the top of a tree, an object 3-4x the size of a large dog, full black head and orange body. Thudded onto the ground, hidden by bushes and shrubbery. The 3 people I was with freaked out and ran back up to the campsite. I didn't. I stopped, waited to see for any movement or a sign of any life. Nothing. A little creeped out, I slowly walked back up to a run. We all looked at each other confused and scared. We all saw it. What was it? We told everyone else and they freaked out as well. Ended up telling them we were joking. About a month later I rode back to the camp with a friend to see if I could see anything. Again, nothing. To this day no one believes me. When I was about 10 I awoke to a loud buzzing sound. I thought it was our stereo. Nobody else was awake. I went to turn it off and realized it wasn't on. Then I saw lights outside the house. I thought they were headlights at first and approached the door to go outside. I realized they were not headlights. They were not positioned correctly nor did they illuminate the ground. There were about 6 of them scattered around that I could see through our window. I became terrified and frozen in fear. Then I went back to bed. I asked everyone if they saw or heard anything in the morning during breakfast or if anybody would have been on our property that night. The answers were all no, so I didn't tell anyone what I saw and heard. A psychiatrist told me it was probably just a dream. I don't believe it was a dream. It disturbed me a lot. I didn't talk about it for about 20 years out of fear of ridicule and almost forgot the event entirely until something drugs it up. I have no mental illness. I'm not on drugs. Since then in adulthood I've seen a bee land on my window and emit lights from its antenna. No evidence or other witness makes these events hard to talk about. Fortunately I had another person witness with me a dark figure in my backyard that shape-shifted to conceal it and flowed around erratically before darting off. We thought it was an intruder at first. I got the other person and where I saw the dark figure was instead what appeared to be our black trash can. I was confused until it suddenly morphed into the person. It looked like a shadow person, and kind of ran in circles before going around the corner. We witnesses all this again through the window while looking outside. I was happy to finally have somebody else finally witness something with me so that I didn't feel crazy. Alright, I've got a UFO story. I'm in a car with my 2 friends going to a Halloween party in 2019. We live in LA, driving on the freeway towards La Canada Flintridge. I'm in the back seat, to my right there's mountains. I see a fluorescent blue ball of light in the sky above the mountains, but it's far in the distance at this point. I mention it to my friends, and they see it too and we're speculating on what it could be, but they eventually talk amongst themselves while I'm still keeping an eye out. At this point in my life I was really interested in uses. I had many experiences during this time. If you look at the sky often and long enough, you'll see strange things. So, eventually I have no clear view of it anymore, the mountains end up blocking my sight, so I go back to talking with my girls. As soon as we exit the freeway, we make a wide right turn. To our right, right in front of the mountains is the blue light again, only this time it's a blue band around a flying saucer. It's huge, metallic, we all fucking saw it, but couldn't stop since there were other cars behind us, so we made a left onto the next street. Got out of the car, ran back down the block, and it was a tiny blue light in the distance again. I'll never forget it. The driver, my best friend, has a hard time remembering it, which is odd because that's all we talked about the whole night. The other friend remembers vividly though as well. Anyways, that's just one of my 4 stories, but that was the closest encounter I've ever had, and still don't even believe myself sometimes when I think about it. Another weird experience soon after happened and I stopped all contact/interest in uses or whatever the fuck goes on up there. I had a bad gut feeling and just decided it wasn't something I needed to look more into. I'd experienced enough. Every once in a while though I'll see those crazy things doing zooms in the sky. About 8 years ago, I was paying in a shop when I heard a loud crash. I looked outside and saw a car wreck. A car had hit another and pushed them into a big pole that held power lines. I took off running to the scene. The pole was broken and started to fall onto the car. Power lights were starting to droop toward the car. The driver inside was hurt and dazed. The door was dented a bit at hip height, and all doors were locked. The driver was bleeding from the head and could not unlock the doors. The power lines drooped lower. I dug my fingers into the crack where the door closed and began pulling. I bent the top of the door with my bare hands. I called an onlooker over to help me pull. I was able to get an arm in to unlock the door. Then the onlooker and I were able to force the door open and get the man out before the power lines touched his car. Then I went over to the other car and found a stunned, injured teenage boy standing there, dizzy and tottering. I picked him up and carried him to the curb and sat him down to wait for help. He was about 6 feet tall. At this point, I was 36 and very out of shape, a mom to a toddler. Needless to say, I was so sore the next day. College, 2 townies sneaked into my girls-only dorm and crept into the shower room on my floor. I was just coming in for the night, and I heard a girl scream. I saw the teenage boys running away. Without thinking, I dropped everything and chased them. What was I going to do if I caught them? No clue. But I was on their tail. They got on a bike and sped off together, surprisingly fast. In chunky-heeled loafers, I managed to catch up to them and chase them across the entire campus, telling them off the whole way and taking swings at them. Didn't land any. I stopped chasing when they were off the campus. Then I walked back to my dorm and gave security descriptions of the peeping toms. The next morning, the dean of students called me to thank me for protecting the other student who had been in the shower, getting peeped at. Something happened a few nights ago that really weirded me out. I'm a very light and fitful sleeper and wake up several times each night. Last week, I awoke at the end of what I suppose was a dream, but it sure didn't feel that way. When I woke up, I idly and groggily realized that I had begun dreaming just a few seconds before. The dream hadn't entirely coalesced and was still just a jumble of images and feelings. Although dream time is notoriously inexact and malleable, would estimate that I had only been dreaming for 15 to 30 seconds. I began to drift back off to sleep, trying to make sense of the dream images, when I suddenly jolted completely awake and sat straight up in bed with a start. I realized that in fact, I had been dreaming, or at least in some sort of altered state of consciousness, for a while, as I very clearly and very suddenly remembered the last thing that was happening before drifting sideways into the jumbled proto-dream. A man whom I didn't recognize but who seemed very concrete, very substantial, and very real, was hypnotizing or enchanting me, for want of a better word. He was telling me to sleep, to relax, to forget what I had seen and experienced, to believe it was all just a dream that I had imagined. Try as I might, I could not remember anything I had dreamed that night before this fragment of a memory. It was very unsettling, especially because this memory very clearly and very sharply began in the middle of something. There was no hazy lead-in to the man speaking. My memory of him begins in mid-sentence. I sat up in the dark for quite a while trying to make sense of what had happened. I can remember his soothing, yet somehow powerfully commanding, tone telling me to forget. I can remember drifting from there into the short jumble of images and thoughts at the beginning of the normal, dream state that he was encouraging me into, but I cannot remember a single thing about what I was dreaming before that. It really felt like I had unexpectedly woken up before I was supposed to, before the enchantment could fully take hold. Like I wasn't supposed to remember the fragment of memory that contained him, the fragment that began with him in mid-sentence, obviously at the very end of whatever he had been doing to me or telling me. I was only supposed to remember the dream I was drifting into, and nothing before. It's really been disturbing me and on my mind since it happened. He seemed so real and so separate from me. It feels like somebody made a mistake in letting me remember him. I woke up too early when I wasn't supposed to. Who is this man? What did I see and experience that I can't remember now? How many times has this happened? Has it happened again since? How would I even know? What have I forgotten? I had two incidents that I never understood, even though both were initiated by me. Both incidents involved the same woman, a teacher I'll call Mrs. A. First day of 5th grade, we were assigned a coloring project. I went to her, embarrassed, because I had no crayons or markers. We were poor, Mom had only been able to get the basics. Mrs. A turned to grab a pack of crayons, and as she turned back, I knew. I just knew, and blurted out, "You're pregnant." She dropped the crayons. Whispered, "How did you know?" I only just found out myself. I honestly told her I don't know how I knew, I just did. She asked me to keep it quiet until she was ready to announce it, and I agreed. Months later, in art class, Mrs. A sat on the edge of a table while the art teacher explained something. I bolted upright and screamed, "Look out," in Mrs. A's direction. No idea why. Everyone looked at me weirdly, including Mrs. A. I felt my face flush. I just made a fool of myself and I didn't even know why. Then, about 4 seconds after I'd yelled, the table collapsed under Mrs. A, dropping the pregnant woman to the floor. Everything got chaotic after that, and Mrs. A was rushed off to get herself and the baby checked. She never seemed comfortable around me after that second incident. She was still an attentive teacher, but her interactions with me became stiff and awkward. I can't blame her, though at the time I was hurt by the change. I couldn't understand what I did wrong to make her act that way. It was back when I was working at Disney. I was getting guests complaining about their popcorn going missing from their bags or strollers while they were at Lion King, a show. I thought maybe it was some kids, so I decided to wait and see what was going on. Then 3 crows, maybe ravens, not sure, started talking to one another. One was looking at the entrance of the show, the second was looking at the exit, and the third was on the trees looking at the strollers. When the doors closed, the first 2 called out and the third one flew to a stroller where a guest had left her purse hidden and popcorn inside it. The third bird opened up the bag, ate some of the popcorn, called out, they switched places, the first bird, ate, called out, they switched and finally the second bird ate. That wasn't even the craziest part. After they had all eaten, they go back to their original places. The third bird puts everything back inside the purse, hit it again and he called out a last time and they all fly away. I remember just standing there shocked and angry I didn't have a camera on me. I went with a group of friends to an artificial city made on the bank of a lake. A weekend getaway of sorts. The city has many abandoned buildings and many half-completed buildings, and so one night we decided to explore it. We went down the hill from our villa and there were steps leading to the main road downhill that were covered on both sides with the forest. So as we were going down, a very cute white-colored dog is following me downhill. We came down, sat there for a bit, the dog sat with us too. It was the dead of the night, probably 2/3 is, and we see this line of cars coming and going from an abandoned building. I just remember thinking of it as being very odd. We panicked a little, and rushed back up through the same stairs, and the dog was beside me the whole time. Now, here's the catch, as soon as we reached our villa that dog was gone. We looked around for it but didn't find it. We were there for a couple more days after that and never saw it again. Kind of freaked me out honestly lol. My father used to take me fishing a lot when I was a child. I hadn't learned how to properly cast my line yet he would always do it for me, but this time he wanted to show me and get me to do it. So he baits up my hook, does a few demonstrations and goes over to cut up some bait for himself. I reel back and cast the line out as far as I could. As a fucking seagull was flying by, I somehow hooked the poor bastard while it was still in flight in the air. It came crashing down and I started yelling to my dad that I caught a bird. He had his back turned away from the water at the time, so he was saying, "What the fuck are you talking about?" And turns around to see this seagull splashing frantically on my line and yells at me, "What the fuck are you doing?" He had to wind it in and try to get the hook out from its wing. Meanwhile, a small crowd of people were gathering around thinking we were going to use the bird as bait. Honestly, the most hilarious experience of my life. I was around 9 or 10 years old when I was home alone with just my older brother, and it was around 9 p.m. My brother was asleep in his room and I knew my mom's bus was going to reach our complex soon, so I put on my shoes to walk to the bus stop and meet her. We had a sliding door that led to our balcony and a curtain. Both were closed, so no way of air/wind possibly getting in. As soon as I reached for the front door handle, the curtain moved and I heard a faint girl's voice telling me, "No, don't go, don't leave." I stood at the front door frozen in a state of shock for about a minute or two and finally built up the courage to get out the door and run to the bus stop. It didn't click until a couple days later. A blacked out truck that I've never seen before, our neighbors barely had visitors, especially that late at night, was turning out of our section of the parking lot and sped out of the back exit of the complex that never had security guards by it. The security and management had a flyer posted on the community board to beware of that exact truck I seen. I always wondered what could have happened to me if I never heard that voice or seen the curtain moving out of the corner of my eye.
Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, share and subscribe. The Internet Surfer on YouTube for more horror and scary stories.